Welcome to the Creek. Midweek.
Come on now, people. Come on now, people. Come on now, people. Gonna praise the Lord. Come on now, church. Come on now, church. Come on now, church. Gonna praise the Lord.
Well, welcome to the Creek Midweek podcast in its unusual form, where Trevor and I have a conversation about last Sunday's message, about all things world and humanity.
Just a small topic.
We've talked Nerf wars, we've talked calculus. Who knows where we'll go today? Pastor Trevor, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I am.
I see that you are fully embracing the Christmas lights.
Absolutely.
Got the tree. Now you've got the dangles. I mean, it's pretty nice.
Yeah. For folks who don't know, I have a tree back here in front of me that was in this storage room, and so it's part of what is lighting me, illuminating this beautiful face that you see. But yeah, see, I was bored. I felt like, this is backwards. Weird. Okay, all this space right here, it was just like, ugh, got to do something back there. So threw my Christmas lights up. It looks really good on the update videos because I use a different camera besides the computer, and you can't see like that big pile of stuff right down there. But anyway, this looks better than last week. At least you're not looking at a bunch of paint cans.
Makes me want to get out my Christmas tree.
Well, some folks are actually decorating their house right now as a thing for people to go look at. They can drive around and see Christmas lights. It gives you hope, right?
Yep.
So
yep. I'm all for that. All about that.
Maybe we should just do it. Maybe we should just put out. You should just put out a Creek executive order.
Yeah. I would like to see how that would go. See what the full weight of my office is.
I got a feeling you'd be surprised. But we are going to talk today about Trevor's message from Sunday called Daring Hope, which, Trevor, if you will allow me, I will say it was really, really good.
Well, I appreciate that.
Sunday, I was amongst a few folks there trying to pull it off. We did have a little bit of technical difficulty and stress Sunday morning, but so I listened Sunday, but I didn't get to really, really, really be into it. And when I listened back to it, I was like, man, everybody needs to be sharing this message right now because it's so good. And it seems like not only because of the COVID situation, but I don't know if it's just me, but it just feels like so many people are dealing with tough things right now. In addition to that, like lots of people losing loved ones, stuff like that going on. And man, it's just such a timely message in the midst of.
I think that everything that's going on is amplifying everything. Any difficulty that you've had leading up to this season, I think it's like someone reached over and turned the volume up. If you were struggling and, in some relationships, this certainly hasn't made it easier. If you had some hardship going on, inside your family, it probably hasn't made it easier. Certainly if you were going through a sickness already. And I think that's one of the toughest things that I'm reading about and hearing about is just folks who have unrelated illness, unrelated sickness that, they're having to deal with it, all alone because of visitation restrictions. And so, this whole season is just taking a magnifying glass to already a difficult life or difficult, normally difficult things that come our way and just, making them be cast in a different light, I guess, and the shadow of those things can even be bigger just because of everything else that's going on.
Yeah. I mean, even folks who've had loved ones pass away, they're not really able to properly memorialize and honor that person with a typical normal funeral that they would like to have, and because folks can't come. And I've been trying to think about how we could maybe help that situation as the church, whether it's through helping them stream those to people or putting together tribute videos or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, different conversation, I guess.
Well, I think too, for pastors and church staffs, pastoral care is a much different thing. I just talked to a friend of mine just a few moments ago who's in Staten Island, and he's lost a handful of people in his church to COVID-19. He's got dozens more that have tested positive, and the pastoral care element of checking on folks and caring for people who have lost loved ones, I mean, it's pretty much relegated to the phone. And so it's making loving your neighbor as a real challenge from what we have known about that in the past. You know, it's like, how can we love our neighbor from a distance? And that's, you know, to give a little plug for this Sunday, that's what we're going to be talking about. You know, we talk about Jesus loving people up close, but what happens when you can't love people up close? How does that look, or how should it look? And so there's just lots of people dealing with lots of things that we've never had to think about and never anticipated, and it just makes this whole entire experience that much more challenging.
Yeah. Is that John Welburn that you spoke to?
Yeah,
or?
John Welburn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, our folks would know
Yeah.
John. I'm sure he's been at the creek several times to speak, and so I was wondering about him this morning, actually, thinking, man, being right there in the epicenter of, you know, what they're calling the epicenter of this in America, must be a
And that was
challenge.
part of what he was saying. You know, the challenge of how do you love people, take care of people, and really do the job of shepherding and leading when you can't leave your house.
Yeah.
When it's got to be just, you know, I'm going to call somebody, I'm going to Zoom someone. You know, it just makes it different. It makes it a challenge. So
Yeah. It's definitely different. I mean, one thing I've been thinking about, and I didn't plan on saying this, but and this thought definitely isn't fully developed, but one potential positive I think that can come out of this is we very much value the physical, and there is something missing, certainly, in the fact that you and I are not physically in the same space right now. But as it relates to spiritually, you know, we still are together spiritually, and with what we believe that that's way more important than the physical anyway. And so, you know, whether we're communicating at separate times, you know, because a lot of the services, churches are doing live services and these things and trying to do them live, and that's becoming even more difficult. And there's an element of it being live and in the same time that makes us feel more connected and all of that. But I think that as this gets more stripped away, where physically we're not together, and eventually, you know, God forbid, but it seems as though eventually we're going to get to the point where even we're not joining together live for our Sunday services and that sort of thing. It doesn't mean that we're still not connected in as powerful and as big of a way, even when we feel like it feels a little less real or connected or whatever. Does that make any sense?
yeah, I think that I was just jotting down a thought as you were saying that. You know, that absence doesn't change the reality of love. It doesn't change the reality of care. It just changes our perception. So we can learn new perceptions and we can gain deeper perception and broader perceptions. And I think that's probably, you know, this is an evolution. This is a season of adaptation where we're learning to adapt, and we have an amazing capacity to adapt to new things and new ways. And I think that's pretty much what we're all learning to do right now, is to sharpen our skills of adapting and being flexible, because the reality of things, it's not changed. It's just many times the perception of how we're experiencing it and how we see it and how we think about it. That's the part that's having to change and we're having to roll with.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously things are serious and things are heavy and things are going on in the world, but in the spirit of, you know, what Jeremiah taught us, as you reminded us Sunday, we need to go on with life. We need to continue living. We need to continue pursuing the goodness and the lesson in all these situations. And so, yeah, things have changed, but, you know, I think we still have to be who we are. And so in the spirit of that, Trevor, some things that have changed as it relates to you. I noticed that you mowed your yard the other day, and yesterday you told me that you were doing landscaping all day. What's going on?
We did. We were supposed to, like many people, we were supposed to be on spring break this week, and so Allison has a vacation week, and I had a vacation week, and the boys were going to be off school, and that whole thing, and.
Yep.
So we just decided, we're gonna do some work. We're gonna do a workation, and so we went and we procured a lot of you can see how skilled I am with this because I can't even remember the name of this mulch. So we got mulch, and so we mulched about 13 trees, and then I knew it was supposed to rain, so I thought, I might as well practice this grass thing. So mowed the grass again because it's growing exponentially fast. Put the boys with a couple of shovels digging out a ditch so the drainage system would continue to flow the way it's supposed to. So nice. It was a family affair. Allison was doing a lot of the mulching. I was doing a lot of the mowing and the weed eating, and the boys were doing a lot of digging. And at the end of the day, it was a lot of fun. So we've been exercising our green thumbs of late. So.
Yep, it's awesome,
and it's been enjoyable.
Absolutely, and that's the thing is like some of these things that we don't necessarily like. I hate weed eating. I despise weed eating. My first job ever. One of the first days on the job, they handed me a weed eater. It was Rabin Warren actually, and he handed me a weed eater and said, "Hey, go weed eat this lot." And it was literally basically a field. It was a gravel lot, but it had looked like a field. And I had to do that day. He taught me how to use that weed eater. And I've despised weed eating ever since. But a couple of days ago, I weed eated. And I enjoyed it.
Well, Shepherd is 9. And so when I bought a weed eater, I had in mind that I think he's basically the age where he could do this. And so I bought one with a battery rather than being a gas powered because they're a little bit lighter and more, manageable for someone his age. So I let him weed eat the front ditch area of our house and showed him how to do it. Told him to think about it like a nice haircut. Doesn't want to go too close to the ground. That would be bad. Just knock the top off, make it even with everything else. And so he did a great job. But after that, the length of our front yard, after that was over, he was ready to move on to something else. And that was okay because I would rather do around the house and the other landscaping things as well. But so it was good. And Grayson, you put a shovel in his hand, bro, and he's good to go for hours.
I could see that.
Hours. So, but it was good. You just try to figure out, what you need to do. I feel like everybody's spending a lot of time looking at their house. It's like, we changed light bulbs in the garage yesterday and made sure that all of them were up and running. And, you're spending your time in new ways. And I think that's part of a little bit of what we talked about Sunday about things that we can learn in an unwanted season and
Sure.
the blessings of the unwanted season. So that's what we're doing over here.
Well, since you likened weed eating unto cutting hair, now that Shepherd has that under his belt and we won't be receiving haircuts for a while, you gonna let him cut your hair?
Well, Allison and I have been debating about the whole hair cutting thing. I told her that I wouldn't think twice about letting her operate on me. So I think I would let her cut my hair, and she's a little less reluctant. She says, you care more about your hair than you do your internal organs. And she says, I'm not so sure if we should do this or not. I don't know if our relationship is prepared for a hair cutting exercise. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, if this persists a little bit longer, I'm just about ready to, take my own chances with my own ability to cut my own hair. So, lots of exciting things throughout this. I mean, you can make it fun even when, it's a little uncomfortable. We'll see what happens with the hair. It's a developing story.
Yeah. Well, last couple times we spoke, there have been a few times when you you got on a little rant, you got on a little preaching moment, because you just can't help it. And I was sitting over here wanting to be like, yes, go, amen, or something, And so I've created a little something to fill that space. So today, if if you get on a little, if I'm over here feeling that, I'm gonna let you get finished, and then we're gonna roll this.
Amen. Yes, Lord. Amen.
Hey,
Yes.
I need that in
Okay.
my life.
So if you finish something and
I
I'm
think
feeling
that would be great.
and I'm feeling that, I'm rolling it.
Oh, maybe we can incorporate that on Sundays as well.
Let's do it. Well, we'll keep it fun at least. So, like I said, Sunday definitely was a great message, great reminder, all about hope. You used Jeremiah and all the unfortunate circumstances that he found himself and the people around him, the Israelites in, which were incredibly unfortunate. And I think I saw one of our church folks post on I think it was Facebook, on social media, about the message that basically if Jeremiah could have hope in the midst of everything that he was dealing with, that certainly this situation that we're dealing with doesn't even compare. So certainly we could have hope. And you clarified what hope is. That hope, you said hope is not wishing, hope is confidence. And that's an incomplete paraphrase of what you said, but essentially hope is not wishing, hope is confidence. And that's really not a subtle difference. It may be one word a little bit different, but in reality, that's a huge difference as it relates to how that practically plays out in our lives. And so what are some of the practical implications of followers of Jesus getting that definition wrong as it relates to us, walking out our faith? Why is that such an important thing?
Well, I think one, it creates a bit of an imbalance for us. When we think about the future in terms of I'm hoping, I'm wishing this turns out to be a certain way, but I'm not really sure. I think that just leaves us in just a dusky uncertainty that's just not very healthy. I love to think about God's promises as what sets the parameters for future reality. And, as the way I like to talk about it Sunday was they're windows into our future. So if God has said it and God has promised it, then we really can count on it. And that gives us a picture of our future of what we can expect with confidence. Now, the details of all of that, we can't control, and we can't manage all outcomes, but God has given very clear promises about what we can confidently expect about the future, that He's not going to leave us, He's not going to forsake us, that all things are going to work out for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And so, you take all of these promises that God that He has made to us, and that begins to help us know how to envision and see the future before the future happens. So, even in the face of whatever present reality I'm in, I'm able to visually construct and imagine a future reality that is far better than the present reality. And so that gives me the strength and the inspiration and the motivation. It gives me a healthier attitude. It gives me a deeper perspective. It allows me to, face what I'm going through and to put my head down and to just push through, because I believe that on the other side of it, there's something better. There's something good.
Yeah. So Sunday, you mentioned that when we get that definition right, when it's not a wish, but it is confidence, that it just makes us a much more stable person. If you're going through life and your hope is just a wish, I likened it unto, and I thought of, when I decide to work hard on something, or I decide to start working out or whatever. I was thinking about when I was a kid and I was all into basketball and I wanted to dunk, and I started, my dad bought me all these jump programs and the big jump sole shoes you can put on your feet and whatnot. I had confidence that if I did that, it would work. I wasn't wishing. I actually thought this will work because I saw the reviews and my dad told me it would work and all this stuff. And so I was doing the workouts. Like it allowed me to keep on going, like in those moments of like tiredness and weakness and hurts and pains and early morning, whatever. It was like, I keep doing this not because I'm wishing. This isn't a pipe dream. This is something I actually believe is going to work. And so I think, when you said that Sunday, I thought, man, it does. That's what I thought of, was like I was so much more stable in my pursuit of X, whatever that is, because this is not a wish. This is competence.
Yeah, I think, and back to Hebrews 11, which has kind of been the springboard for the past 2 weeks, when these men and women live their life in faith and consequently the hope that came as a result of that faith, they really did confidently expect that the future would be one where God kept all of his promises. And that really did change the way they lived their life. It changed the way they encountered difficulty, and it changed the way they encountered betrayal, and it changed the way they encountered sickness, and it even changed the way they encountered death, because their hope existed on both sides of death. It existed on this side of death, and it even surpassed to the other side of death. And when your hope extends beyond death to the life to come and the world to come, it really does. I mean, how can it not change, impact, affect the way that we live? It's not to say that, like Jeremiah, that sometimes the emotional toil of life it can get the best of us, and we sense the whole spectrum of emotions. It doesn't mean we are, insulated from any of those things, but yet, even though we feel those things, encounter those things, we don't become a casualty to those things. We don't become a victim to those things. And we continue to move forward. We continue to live out God's plan and purposes in this life. We do our best to do what we know that we should do and that we can do. And all the while, we're leaving all the consequences to God because we can trust him and our hope is in him. I think that hope is that it's the gas in the tank that allows us to really push through the hard times and the hard moments, because we believe that, as Paul said, that whatever sufferings exist in this world, they're really not to be compared to the glory that is to come. That's hope. It's James saying that though I'm going through the trial of my faith, I know that perseverance is being added to my faith. So that's seeing a future reality. It's Job saying he knows the way that I take, and when I come forth, I will come forth as gold that's been tried in the fire. That's hope beyond the moment. So, I mean, it's just all throughout the scriptures when you read about men and women who had hope, and they looked beyond the present, and they saw a future reality that gave them strength to keep on going.
One of the points that you made Sunday, and you mentioned there a little bit, was, how that obviously Jeremiah still experienced all this emotion. He still felt all of this, and he was not ashamed or embarrassed of it. He actually expressed those things to God. And, it made me think about all the folks through Scripture, like David and Job and others, who went through terrible things. David, all of them had incredible highs and incredible lows. I was thinking about David talking about, weeping in his bed and filling his couch with tears and all this stuff, and how that really, as we walk through these things, it is incredibly important to understand that we can take that stuff to God, that he wants us to take that stuff to him, that is the model that's been given to us from these heroes of the faith of, sometimes I think we get into this trap of feeling like, and I can speak for myself at least during certain parts of my life, this trap of feeling like, man, this fear that I feel, this anger that I feel, this loneliness, whatever it is, this is just a weakness, and I just need to overcome it, personally. And then we kind of just pretend it's not there or whatever, and we never really take it to the Lord. And I know I've found in my life that has been an incredible incredibly liberating and helpful thing to realize, oh man, God said, cast your cares on me because I care for you. And the NIV says, cast your anxiety on me. He wants that. He's not surprised by how I feel. He's not embarrassed by how I feel or made uncomfortable by how I feel. He's like my parent who's like, yeah, come tell me how you feel. It's going to be good for you if you do that. So that's what I thought of when you mentioned that. What do you think as far as the significance is of, did you have an experience where you realized, man, I need to lay all this on him? Is that relatable at all, kind of what I described, or how did you kind of come to that conclusion, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my mind was racing when you were saying those things. You know, the thing that struck me about Jeremiah, you know, and we had a staff meeting last Tuesday with everybody, you know, on Zoom, and I talked a little bit on a different note about Jeremiah and his ministry. So I'd been camping out with Jeremiah's story for, you know, a couple of weeks. But the thing that is really striking, I think, and encouraging is that, you know, how he felt and what he knew, those things were in conflict with each other. He felt one set of emotions, except he had an entirely different set of convictions about what he knew. You know, when he gets to chapter 3 and he says, you know, after he rehearses all of the bad and the terrible, I mean, you know, it's like I said Sunday, I mean, there's a reason why we don't just read chapters 1, 2, and the first part of 3. It's because, man, this is raw. This is graphic. If this was a movie, I mean, this is PG-14. This is like, you know, hey, this is pretty graphic for kids. And Allison said, you know, the boys were watching from home the other day, and when I got to some of those verses about what was happening in Jerusalem, said that, you know, Grayson and Shepard, they're turning around and looking, they were like, my gosh, this is terrible. Yeah. But, you know, he gets to chapter 3, he says, but yet will I dare to hope when I think about these other things that I know. So, you know, the things that he had experienced and seen, those had created a certain amount of emotions and certain type of emotions. But yet, on the other hand, there were some things he knew to be true about God and the greater reality. And sometimes that's our battle. We think because we feel a certain set of emotions, then it must indicate that we don't believe, or we lack faith, or, you know, that we don't have hope. But he had two sets of conflicting emotions, and he decided to place his emphasis on what he knew to be the greater reality. And as he began to think about God, his faithfulness, his love, his fresh mercies every day, the fact that God is his portion, and as he began to think about those things, I'm sure he still mourned all the things that he saw, heard, and experienced, but yet something else changed that allowed him to be able to carry the weight of those things. And that's what's so great. You find David doing that in the Psalms when he says, oh God, why has thou forsaken me? And then in the very next breath, he says, yet will I praise you. It's like, okay, he's got two different things going on at the same time. And I think that, you know, much of life is like that. We're trying to bring our conflicting emotions with what we know to be true about God and life, and to keep our perspective on the eternal things, the weightier things, the transcendent things, because those things do make us stronger, and those things help us push through the hard times.
Yeah, it's almost like we have, you have these two things. You have your what's really going on, and you have reality, what you know to be true. So you have how you feel, and then you have reality. And it's almost like the key is make sure you put those in the right place. You know what I mean? Like, make sure that you're taking the way you feel to God and not leaving it up here and thinking about it all the time and talking it out to everybody. And, there's people that you can talk about those things to, but it's probably not for public consumption on social media or those sorts of things. And really, as you alluded to this Sunday, I can't remember exactly in what context, but about, making sure that the thoughts that we're having, that we're not telling ourselves this story that isn't true. And so it's like putting those things, those fears and those anxieties and all that emotion on God where it's supposed to go, having that conversation with him and maybe a few close others, but then speaking and thinking about what's true and what's real and all those sorts of things. So it's kind of just like maybe putting those things in their proper place.
Well, it's like, Jeremiah, it's by the time that he gets to chapter 3, he says, I'm never going to forget this awful time in chapter 3, verse 20. He says, as I grieve over my loss, he's talked about his anguish and distress in verse 5. He's talking about how he feels like he's walled in and he can't escape. When I read that, I'm like, he felt quarantined. He felt like he was shut off from everybody and everything. He says, I've seen all these afflictions, and it's, by the time he gets to verse 21 of chapter 3, it's almost like he's saying, I can't handle any more bad news. I can't handle any more of this. So I've got to pause and I've got to pivot and I've got to remind myself and think about what is even more true than all of these things. And there's something that is transcendently more true than this terrible thing. And of course, that's when he goes in and he starts reminding himself, like in verse 31 of chapter 3, no one is abandoned by the Lord forever. They felt abandoned, but yet he knew that was not true. And he just goes on to rehearse, truer things that were greater than the things that were right in front of him. And I think that we have to do that, every day it's news, and every day we can get as much of it as we want, but there has to be those moments and there has to be margin to remind ourselves about what is really true. And that's not isolation. That's not like pretending there's not bad in the world and there's not difficulty, but it's making sure that we take time to rehearse out loud to ourselves in prayer, conversations at home with our family, to remind ourselves what's true about God, to remind us what is true about what he has promised to do. And, it's true, weeping may endure for the night, but it's also true that joy comes in the morning. It's true that there's ashes on the ground, but it's also true that there's beauty beyond the ashes. To rehearse and to, proclaim verbally to ourselves and to the people that, are in our family and our friends, to encourage each other with the greater truths, because those things do impact how we feel, and those things do impact the way we respond. And it's even more important to keep going back to what is true, to help us have a barometer for how we feel, that keeps us from going in one direction or the other, to a point where it's not healthy. So I think that we all have to just decide, like Jeremiah, to, okay, I've got to remind myself right now, this is what's true in spite of how I feel. This is what's true in spite of how I feel. And I think the more that we do that, the healthier we will feel, the healthier our thoughts will be. And in the end, the healthier our entire life will ultimately be, when we can begin to barometer our emotions and our thoughts, and we can channel them in between the two realities, the reality of this life, the reality that is God and his promises, and to be able to live in the tension of those two things really does put us in a place of health. We don't deny what's going on around us, but yet we know that there's more going on around us than we know, that we can see and experience, and that we can trust God with, and we begin to visualize what the future could be and what the future is going to look like based on what God has said. And I just feel like that puts us in a better place.
For sure. And also it prepares us for eventualities as well. Like, it makes me think of, in the security and defense world, they talk a lot about pre-decide what you're going to do, pre-decide what you're willing to do, because when you get in this moment where you may have to defend someone or defend your family or whatever, your anxiety level is going to go through the roof. Your heart rate's going to go up. You're not going to be able to make a good decision, and you're not going to have the time to make a good decision. And so they talk about running scenarios. And I think that that's an incredibly helpful practice spiritually as well. And sometimes those things can be they can come across as morbid or whatever, but at the same time, we got to face reality. And so, that's something that Jess and I do from time to time. It's important to me that we talk through, what if this were to happen to us? What if something happened to me? What if something happened to her? What if something happens to one of our kids? Because this is possible. We see this happening all the time. And we need to talk about now how we will handle that when and if that happens, so that we don't just, and I have no idea, emotionally, psychologically, what that does to a person or what it would do to me, but I just feel like it gives us a better shot at responding in truth rather than responding in emotion if we kind of go ahead and have those conversations and pre-decide.
I don't know, and it's true for everybody, that there's some things that surprises us that shouldn't, just because we know the nature of life. We know the nature of a world where God has given free choice, and consequences of those free choices are sometimes very unpleasant and painful. Why is it that we are surprised when a friend disappoints us? Why in this world did we ever place an expectation on someone that they would never disappoint us, that they would never fail, that they would never, not meet our expectation or meet our standard? It's like, why would we ever be surprised when we know we're all broken and fallible and sinful and in need of God's grace? It's like, why does that surprise us when it happens? We should have already expected that. And when it happened, it's like, okay, hey, I love you. I decided I was going to love you before this. And, I'd already decided to give grace before it happened, because I knew it was going to happen. There was going to be a moment. There was going to be a time, so I think sometimes it's like, why are these things, surprising us? You read Matthew 24 and Luke 21, and Jesus talks about to his disciples the inevitable things that are coming down the path of life. There's going to be violence, there's going to be wars, and there's going to be nations that fight against nations, and there's going to be devastating natural disasters, and there's earthquakes, and he even mentions pestilence and sickness. And, he says these things, they're going to happen. You can count on it. I think almost to say, don't be shocked by it. Peter, he used the words, he says, don't think it's strange. And I think this is probably me memorizing the New King James or the King James from way back. But he says, don't think it strange, the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing has happened unto you. Like, why are you shocked? It's not strange. It's not out of the normal. It's not out of the ordinary. This is a common experience. So when the fiery trial happens, the last thing you should be is be surprised. And the first thing maybe you should be is prepared, because you thought this through. You anticipated it. You put strength down inside your soul for a day such as this, and you garnished all the things that you could garnish for the benefit of your faith, because you knew a day like this would come. So I think the New Testament may be many things, but the one thing that it's not is it is not pie in the sky, and it is not presenting a reality that is counter to the reality that any of us have experienced. It just puts us right down there in the nitty and the gritty and the dirty and the difficult, and says, okay, this is life, but this is walking by faith and living with hope in the middle of it all. This is what it looks like, and this is how you do it. And that's what we should love and appreciate about the scriptures, both Old Testament and New Testament, because nobody rose above the fray of real life, and not even Jesus himself.
I think sometimes we just get so used to reality. We sort of just accept the reality with which we are presented, and we forget, well, when I say reality there, I probably need to define it. We get used to the reality of our physical everyday life, and we forget what the true higher reality is. I thought of this when Jeremiah said, I have forgotten what prosperity is. When he was, at his lowest of lows, and he made that comment, I've forgotten what prosperity is. The word that stuck out to me there was the word prosperity. and essentially he's saying, I don't have prosperity anymore. And I looked up the definition of prosperity according to Merriam-Webster. The condition of being successful or thriving, especially economic well-being. And what I wrote down was that when we live in constant prosperity, we forget that it's a gift. And so when we have prosperity taken, when we have whatever taken, whatever gift, I mean, this could apply to anything. Anytime something is taken, when we have that huge emotional reaction, and it feels unfair and it feels whatever, we've forgotten that this is a gift, and we've in some way began to cherish the gift more than the giver, which is a really, really bad place to be, because good gifts make good gifts, but they make terrible gods.
Well, that could be a sermon.
Maybe I should write that. We've got it recorded.
So, I think that, one thing that's good to point out is that joy, prosperity, good times are all shadows of the world to come. They're all glimpses of the world to come. And in a world that has pain and disappointment and difficulty, those things make us long for the world to be as it was intended to be, as God had created it in the beginning. And every time we, are with family and there's food and there's drink and there's laughter, even in a world that has a lot of pain, that's just a window to the world to come. That's one of those things that make us long for the restoration of all things when he makes all things new and recreates heaven and earth, that when someone walks in health and lives in health, it's a glimpse of the world to come where that is the only reality. I think that it's these moments in life that are special. It's the birthday party. It's the Christmas morning. It's the walk in the park. It's outside and watching your boys play together. It's all of those things that, for a moment, it's like, that's what it's going to be like all the time. That's what it's going to feel like all the time. And to know that this stuff here is fleeting, it's passing, but what's coming, what's approaching. No wonder, John said, even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus. And nothing awakens our longing for the way things are supposed to be than for those moments that we have to encounter that we know it's not supposed to be this way. It wasn't supposed to be this way. This was not the original intent. This is not God's plan. This is the rebel race and living out the consequences of rebellion that Jesus so graciously came to undo and reverse and to overthrow. And I think that those are the things to keep in mind. When you were saying that, I thought of Habakkuk chapter 3, and of course he's encountered a horrible crisis and an approaching crisis, and some of the best words, I think, in all the Old Testament in chapter 3 of Habakkuk, in verse 17, he says, even though the fig trees have no blossoms and there's no grapes on the vines, and even though the olive crop fails and the fields lie empty and barren, and even though the flocks die in the field and the cattle barns are empty, yet, he uses the same word that Jeremiah uses, yet I will rejoice in the Lord and I will be joyful in the God of my salvation. And here's the thing to keep in mind. He knew what it was like to see the fig trees blossom. He knew what it was like to see the grapes on the vines. He knew what it was like to see the fields full and fruitful. And he saw those things. It was a glimpse of what was coming eventually in eternity. But yet in the real world, when those things were at times less than or depleted, he says, hey, I can still rejoice. I can still have hope because I know what's coming beyond these moments that are painful and challenging and whatnot. So I think that, hope is, I don't think we can underscore how powerful it is, how far reaching it is. I think it's just, we probably just don't have the bandwidth to put it in a proper perspective.
Come on. Hey, if you're listening to this in your car or watching this at home or whatever you're doing and you weren't nodding along to that, you ain't listening. Man, I was having to hold myself back. I about hit that button while you were talking a second ago. That's a good word. That's worth the podcast right there. That these are just glimpses into the world to come, which just feeds our hope, and ignites that even more. I don't even know where I was, but that was awesome. we'll
Yeah, I
get back
took us
into
completely off path.
No, you didn't. You're right on. You're right on. I just got lost in what you were saying instead of thinking about what I was saying next, which is sort of the point of conversation.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but to, just one more thing. I think that, I would hear the old timers, preach. I grew up with mountain Appalachian preaching and they would have, different sayings and different songs that really kind of were, a norm and part of the culture. And, one of the old songs, and you would hear it reiterated in preaching from time to time, this world is not my home, I'm just passing through. And I do think that obviously that's what the New Testament presents. Paul writes to the Corinthians and says, we're just living in tents here. And this is kind of, we're camping out. This is not home. This is just kind of where we're hanging out for the time being. We're headed somewhere, and we're on our way home. And there's this deep longing inside of us to be home, though sometimes we don't realize it. And the angst and the disconnection sometimes we feel with how we feel and what we know. These are all longings of home. It's like being away on vacation. As great as vacation can be, as fun as it can be, as exciting as it can be, boy, at a certain point, you start just wanting to be home again, because no place feels like home, and that's what we have in our souls is this incompleteness, because we know this isn't it. We know that there's more, and we're all to some degree longing for home. Every time we want to make something better, it's a longing for home. Every time we want to see someone get better, healthy, that it's a longing for home. Every time we want to console someone and comfort somebody, it's a longing for home. So I think it's a good perspective just to know, hey, we're here. We're going to live, just like Jeremiah said. We're going to plant gardens. We're going to build houses. We're going to raise kids. We're going to have grandkids. And we're going to love every single moment of it. And we're going to make the most of it. But we also know there's promises of there's more to come and there's better to come. And so that's the fullness of faith and hope, I think, where, even though it's bad, there's lessons to learn even in the difficulty. And there's blessing right in the middle of the difficulty. And that's all of that just helps you get up in the morning and see the day and be ready for it and to enjoy it. And all the while know that this thing's not perfect and there's a lot of challenge, but we've got our eyes not only seeing what's in front of us, but we can see what's beyond it as well.
That's all good stuff right there, man. I know what clip we're going to use to highlight this podcast. So one of your quotes from Sunday was that sometimes you know that he's all you have, but it's not until the lights go out that you realize that he's all you need. And I know that I've certainly experienced that at different times in my life. But what's been your experience with that, and how you came to that conclusion? Have you been in times where you would describe those times as the lights were dimming, so to speak?
I mean, I think so. I hesitate to just say with an emphatic yes, because I feel like people have walked through much darker spaces than I have had to at this point in my life. I know there's dark places. I've had dark places, but I do think there's degrees of darkness, and some have walked through much more difficult, darker places than I have. But I do think that for us in those moments when we have nothing to compare darkness to, darkness is darkness.
Right.
And when we walk through dark places, it's our own personal darkness. And we do realize in those moments where he's all that not only I have, but like you said, he's all that I need, because in those moments when we feel like there's nowhere else to go and no one else to turn to, it really does force us to decide, okay, do I believe this reality about God? Do I believe the promises of God? And, that darkness is just not suffering. Those moments of darkness can be when you just did the most dumb, illogical, crazy thing imaginable. That's a dark place. When you made the wrong choice and you misstepped, and it's like, how in the world did this happen? How did I get here? That's a dark place, and you have to decide in that moment, do I believe that God is who he says he is, that he's patient and long-suffering, he's good and he's kind, that he doesn't hold my sin against me? Do I believe the promises of God that whosoever, confesses their sin, that he's just and faithful to forgive? Do I believe the promise that I'm justified by faith? Romans 5, that just as though I'd never sinned, that's how he sees me. He doesn't see me by my worst moments and my worst mistakes, but when he sees me just as he sees his son Jesus. I mean, it's like, wow, do I really believe that? And can I live in the hope of that in this moment? Though I feel like a piece of garbage, though I feel like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. So dark moments, are just not illnesses, and dark moments are just not financial catastrophes. Darkness can be, just when you've misstepped and you've made a mistake and you said what you shouldn't have said and you did what you shouldn't have done. And those all can be dark moments. And to those moments of darkness, there are moments when I've just had to say, God, I really have no motivation to go forward if these things aren't true. And so it was like a moment of, I've got to decide, am I going to go with what I believe to be true about God and what he said? Or, because if not, I've got to find an entirely different worldview. I've got to find an entirely different path to trod the rest of my life with. So I think, everybody's had those moments, though they look different. And, of course, when we look at somebody else's dark moment, it can be painful to watch somebody walking through a dark place. But when we walk through it ourselves, it really is a different thing. And so, I've been there. I think we've all been there, though, Christians, I'm not going to say love, but Christians can have a tendency to get into a woe is me contest from time to time. Whose dark place was worse. And that's unfortunate. It's like getting into a testifying service and one person testifies about how bad they were before they followed Jesus, and somebody else said, no, I'm going to raise you one, and let me tell you my story. That type of thing. So we shouldn't get hung up on what type of dark place it is. We've all had dark places, and they all work the same. And it's in that place that we really do decide what's real. Yeah. And then I think that's the moment we decide, okay, God, if you are what I have, this feels like one of these moments where nobody else can get me out of this but you. You're what I need. And so it's those moments that stick with us. And it's like Jeremiah said, in verse 20, he says, I will never forget this. I will never forget this. Mm-hmm. And those moments of our life, we will never forget. Whatever they look like and whatever they felt like, we will never forget the moment when we realized, he's all that I need. Now, we may get amnesia after the season has passed. We may get away from the reality of how real God felt in that moment, but the markings of that season stick with us, and it lingers, and we can go back to it and re-anchor and recenter and refocus over and over again.
Yeah, it's almost like I've had I would say 3, as you said, you never forget those. You know, this will never leave my memory. I've had 3 moments that I can look back on and say that I probably was in some level of darkness, but I got to that point each time where I realized, okay, it's almost, one time it was almost as if God were saying, okay, am I enough or not? Like, this is time for you to make that decision and decide, am I going to be enough or not? And in the other 2 cases, it was more of just an awareness that, okay, God is in complete control and I have no strength of my own to do anything. But in all those scenarios, even though it is darkness, what a gift it is, too, that God would put us in a situation to remind us, hey, I'm all you need, you know? I'm all you need. And it's unfortunate that sometimes he has to put us in those situations. And I'm not saying that anything dark that happens is God putting you in that situation at all. But certainly I believe that it could be at certain times and has been for me at moments in the past. So, like, this last time that I got sick, I have a autoimmune disease, and I was in the hospital last year, and that would be one of the times for me where I got to the point where when people would ask me, you know, about the experience, what was going on, I would just say, you know, well, the good thing is that I've been reminded of who's in control and who's in charge. And I really, you know, wasn't just trying to be like, well, this is the right thing to say, so I'll say it. I really, you know, I felt that. It was like, you know, even laying in a hospital bed, like, okay, you know, it's always good to be reminded of who's in charge and how much power I really have in this world and in this game. So I was grateful, you know, for that reminder. But
well, I think, you know, for you know, people in ministry are no different than anybody else. You know,
they're not.
Just because somebody, you know, is in professional ministry, but the one thing that does, you know, one difference that does exist, you know, and there's exceptions, and you know, it's not always true, but one of the things about being in ministry, it does always bring you to the brink of people's most unfortunate experiences, and it brings you to the outskirts of their darkness, and you do walk through life knowing, you know, that life is fleeting, that life is fragile, and you can compartmentalize that, and you can, you know, put that away on a back shelf somewhere and not let it affect you and just get to a cold, numb place. But if you just let that stuff stay in front of you and let it be an instruction, you know, going through life and encountering what people are going through is a reminder that this is just the human experience. And I think that that's one thing that ministry has always provided me, is with a perspective that I've never really been able to get away from. And not to say that it's made me a better human being per se. It's just made me aware of, boy, life is, man, it's short. It's just so stinking short. And whether they were 45 or 95, it never feels long enough. And, you know, I feel like I look at the boys sometimes, and I look at my family and look at Allison, and, you know, well, right now I can see Allison's in the kitchen, and she's got through making the boys pancakes, and the boys are on the couch watching a movie. And, you know, sometimes I'll just kind of zone out of that moment and think to myself, man, this isn't forever, but man, this is so great to see right now. Yeah. And when I remind myself of those things, or remind myself about the marbles in the jar, you know, it does help you to be present, and it helps you to feel the gratitude of the moment. And I feel like that's an important thing to just be able to go through life, just feeling the moment, being present. You know, whether it's, you know, friends around a table, which we can't really do right now, but I tell you, we were texting with some friends last night, and they sent us a text, and they were outside at their fire pit, and they said, man, we sure do miss you guys. And we texted right back and said, oh my gosh, we miss you guys too. And let's just start planning a big celebration when we get together. you know, and if we hadn't appreciated moments with our best friends, you know, leading up to all of this, it would have just been easy to take those moments for granted, and even go through this season where, you know, you don't long for those things as much. But boy, I'm telling you, I just can't wait. There's so many things I can't wait to do that I've just loved doing. And I think, you know, but I'm also learning to love new things and the way we're doing them, you know, right now, and what that looks like and what that means. So it's just, you just have to be present in the moment and be grateful for what was, be grateful for what is, and be grateful for what will be.
When I find myself in those moments like that you're describing, where whether you're just looking over your family, or you're having a moment with your wife or your spouse or your child or whatever, you know, we all have those where we go, or at least I think we do. Maybe I'm isolated, where we say, man, I wish this moment could last forever. You know, I wish I could hold on to this forever. I feel like, and maybe this is whacked out and crazy, but I feel like those are the moments, those are the joy of what is to come, that in some way, shape, or form, God says, okay, all this stuff that you want to be able to have, and these feelings that you want to hang on to, and this love, this what you're feeling right now, you want it forever. Guess what? I'm going to give you that. You are going to have this forever. All those little moments. So when I catch myself in those moments, I try to remember, you know, man, I believe that God is so good that he's going to give us this forever. I think that's part of what eternity is.
Well, I agree. You know, I think I've said it before, but I've always tried to teach the boys to use the term "in the new world to come." But yesterday, after I got through mowing the grass, I was up on the hill and I was looking down, and I saw the boys digging the ditch. I saw Allison over there spreading some mulch around a tree, and I saw that, and it's really deep green grass. I mean, I've been working that grass all winter, and but I just stopped and looked, and there was a sense of satisfaction about mowing the grass and seeing the work complete. There was a sense of joy and satisfaction about seeing the boys work together down and enjoy being in the water and the mud. There was a sense of joy and satisfaction from watching Allison, you know, do her thing over there with the trees. And I just sat there for a moment. It wasn't what I would call spiritual. And I said, wow, this has been a good day. This has been a good day for our family. Today's been a good day, and we're grateful for it. And it's been good. And you know, we appreciated the beauty of creation, and you know, just what you're saying. I mean, all of those things are going to be an unending reality. And you know, when we're in the new world to come and we finish whatever we're working on, man, satisfaction is going to be incredible. It's going to be exponential, and it's going to be a sense of emotions that never fade away. So I do think that, you know, we would all be really well served to think about the kingdom. And I think that's why Jesus told us in Matthew 6, when you pray, our Father who are in heaven, you know, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come. And, you know, to think about the kingdom that is coming, or, you know, as many writers have said, the kingdom that now is, but yet to come. You know, that there are whispers and there are glimpses of the kingdom even now. And that's what the church is supposed to be. We're bringing the kingdom near people. People are getting swept up into the kingdom of God, a kingdom that now is, but yet to come. And I think
Be careful now. You're starting to preach on me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I'm teasing.
But I think that, you know, the way we articulate the world to come is a big deal, because so many of us just heard a very anemic version and picture of heaven that just didn't seem very enticing. You know, lots of times it was presented like we're, you know, disembodied spirits of some kind, and we're singing forever. And if you don't like to sing, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, that doesn't sound great. And, you know, so it's just like this idea of the world to come, which was like, But then, you read the scriptures and you get a robust idea of what this world to come is going to look like. There's going to be art, and there's going to be music, and there's going to be beauty, and there's going to be relationship, and there's going to be houses, and there's going to be all of these things. And, but in the midst, there's no death, and there's no sickness, and there's no tears, and there's peace, and, there's work, and, there's all of this stuff that everything we know to be true about this world is going to be true in the next world, but to a greater degree, in the way that it was supposed to be in the beginning. And boy, when you talk about it that way, or at least for me, I'm like, man, that sounds incredible. That sounds awesome. So I do think that in the midst of a world of pain and suffering and death, thinking about the new world to come is an incredible comfort and encouragement. I think that's why Paul said, in 1 Thessalonians 4, comfort one another with these words, to know that this life is not the entirety of our existence. And that's encouragement. And that's hopeful. That's what Paul wrote about all in First Corinthians 15, what we call the resurrection chapter. He says, if Christ has not risen from the dead, we have no hope. The logic being that since Christ has been raised from the dead, we've got all the hope in the world. And anytime that we wonder whether we have hope, we look back to an empty tomb. And at the caps, the foundation of our faith, there it is, Jesus resurrected over sin, sorrow, and death, and that tells us that the best is yet to come.
Yeah. So while we wait for that salvation, Jeremiah told us it is good to wait quietly for the salvation from the Lord. And so we'll land the plane here. What do you think the practical implications of that are in this time for Jesus followers now, that we wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord?
Well, one translation, renders it, in the meantime, don't complain. In the meantime, don't grumble. Not that we can't talk about it, but don't be like Israel in the wilderness and grumble and mumble and complain. Don't be a people who can't find contentment in the place that you're at. To me, the practical application of waiting quietly is that I do rest my peace, and I rest my joy and my hope on the fact that there's a God in heaven who's in control, and everything is flowing from his hand or through his hand, and his ways are not my ways, his thoughts are not my thoughts. Or as Isaiah said, those that hope in the Lord, their strength is renewed. They run and they don't get tired. They walk and they don't faint. All because, he says, have you not known, have you not heard that the everlasting God, the creator of the earth, that he doesn't faint, he doesn't get tired, but he gives strength to those who are weak. So for me, it just means that I'm hoping in him. I'm resting in him. I understand I have personal responsibilities. I'm going to do everything that I can to bring peace and prosperity to the world that I live. I'm going to pursue those things. I'm going to pray for those things. As I wait quietly during this season, I'm going to do my best to spend resources to help other people, help businesses. I'm going to wait quietly by trying to stay in my house and not get out and do anything irresponsible. I'm going to wait quietly. I'm not going to, just act as though this is unthinkable and that, the most surprising thing ever. So I think that waiting quietly is that, I'm going to trust him. I'm going to seek him. I'm going to use this extra margin to grow deeper and to grow closer. And I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for the promises of God, wait for that reality to become real. And I think that's what else can I do? I trust him. I seek him. As I seek him, I seek the betterment of other people. I love my neighbor. I seek the peace and prosperity of where I'm at, as he told the people in Jeremiah 29. And then I just wait with confident expectation of what he's promised to do. And I think that's all we can do.
Amen. This was a good podcast, I think. I think I would listen to this one.
I've enjoyed it. I mean, I'm listening to the rain out here, watching my tribe in there, and I think some folks when it comes to sermons and preachers and pastors, these are words that I'm trying to just live under myself right now, and just keep on top of the surface, and hopefully it'll just saturate my soul and my thinking, and I think that's how the scriptures work. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. Faith is the beginning point of hope. Hope is the consequence of faith. So I'm trying to, live these words out. I tweeted them this morning because I was reading them and thinking about them. I want to dare to hope today, no matter what the news cycle brings. I got a report last night that my cousin, who I played with a lot when I was a kid, when they would visit, he lives in New Jersey, and he's got COVID-19, and so I called and talked to his dad this morning. As we live through the day, we just wait. We wait for God to do what God's going to do, and we do exactly what Jeremiah said. We trust him, we seek him, we wait for him.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Pastor Trevor, thank you for the time today. I'm sure you have some sort of house chore or landscaping or something to get back to.
Well, it's a little too rainy for the landscaping, but I've got to do one more meeting by Zoom, and then I'm just I'm going to go in here, and I guess it's spring break with the family inside today. Maybe a Harry Potter marathon. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, wow. That sounds like torture to me, but I'm glad you guys enjoy it. Thanks for your time, for the good words. Thanks for the message Sunday. That was great. Thank you, everybody who listened or who is watching. We would love for you to go ahead and subscribe, comment, rate, review, all that good stuff for us. Share this with folks who may be in need of some hope right now. As always, make sure you're following Pastor Trevor. You can find him at Trevor Barton on all social media platforms. Have a great week. Stay hopeful.